This is Block 3, Progressives in Power, Section 4, Teddy Roosevelt, and the section on Upton Sinclair and the jungle. Few books in American history have had the same impact as Upton Sinclair's work, The Jungle. Upton Sinclair was a progressive writer, and his book, The Jungle, led to some very significant legislation directly. One of the few books that directly has ever done such a thing. His book is about an immigrant family who comes to Chicago to live the American dream. One of the major storylines, and the book has lots of storylines in it, and it's a book that's very often read in high school. You may come across The Jungle if you have not already. One of the major storylines in the book The Jungle was how the father of this family worked in the Chicago meatpacking industry. And if we remember from the first block, Chicago was the meat capital of the world. All of those millions of cattle that were raised out west and driven to market by the cowboys were brought on trains to Chicago, where, as you can see from the picture, they were slaughtered and turned into meat products. Being unregulated in a laissez-faire environment, the meat packing companies did things that would turn your stomach today. They were dirty. They were filled with disease. Sick cattle got, killed and put into food just as readily as healthy cattle. The acid that was used that would burn workers' fingers away. Stuff was dropped into vats of meat. Bones were ground up and put in with the meat and served as pure. It was a mess. It was disgusting. And one of the most moving passages, and one of the passages in the book that stopped everybody and made everybody say, "Ew!" was a scene in the book where a worker fell into a vat of meat and was just ground up and served with the sausage, like the rest of the meat scraps were. That this poor worker fell into, a giant grinder that was grinding up, meat products for sausage, and the factory owners did not stop the factory and throw that batch of meat out and give the man a decent burial. No, according to Upton Sinclair's book, he was just turned into sausage with the rest of the meat. The descriptions in the book caused an outrage. Not only the terrible things that were going on with the cattle, but the terrible conditions in which the workers were acting. The book was published in the spring of 1906. By the fall of 1906, Congress, which when it wants to can move very quickly, passed the Meat Inspection Act. And that act, the Meat Inspection Act, set up commissions and regulation for sanitary meat packing, government inspection of meat products that crossed state lines. Any large-scale meat producers now had to meet strict government rules for what could go in the meat, how the meat was prepared, how the meat was produced, the condition of the workers. That this one book and this one story that got people's attention changed an entire industry. Roosevelt was not done. That he knew that the similar problems that were going on in the meat industry were happening in other industries also. So also in 1906, Roosevelt had passed the Pure Food and Drug Act. And what the Pure Food and Drug Act said was that all foods or drugs had to be labeled honestly. Everything that was in the food had to be on a label that said, this is what's in the food. We are so used to this being on our food that it was not always this way. The same thing with drugs. If you bought a pill that was supposed to do something, you had to know, the manufacturer of the pill had to guarantee that what was in the pill was labeled for everyone to see. And then, of course, the government got powers to enforce this. Regulators, inspectors, going around, going to factories, going to food production places, going to places where pills and drugs were produced, making sure that these people were not taking advantage of consumers. This Pure Food and Drug Act morphed today, and it's the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, one of the more important bureaucratic offices in the United States, making sure that our food and drug supply are safe. That began under Teddy Roosevelt with the Pure Food and Drug Act, the Meat Inspection Act. all of which was a reaction to Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle, one of the most important books. You have to rank it up there with Uncle Tom's Cabin and with Silent Spring, which we're going to go over later in the year, as some of the most important books in American political history.